Welcome back to the Python for Beginners series at homastudio, and we introduced the for loop in our last exercise. And since the for loop is really powerful in Python, I just wanted to make sure that I took a few moments to go over some examples just to give a nice little introduction to it before we use it more in the future. The for loop statement is really important because it can help us complete repetitive tasks in Python. It can run functions multiple times, it could run operations multiple times, it can keep us from copying and pasting a bunch of code and reduce our errors and make us work more efficiently. So as a little introduction, here's a file called forloop.py that I have here, and just to give just a start to it, the way that you would write the for loop statement is just to say for I in, and we'll use something called range. Now, you don't always have to have range. There's different things that you can iterate through, but we're just going to iterate through a range right now. I said iterate. I stands for iterate. That means we're going to kind of run through it this many times. So whatever we do, we're going to do this many times. And to write this statement, we're going to put a colon at the end of this. Like many things in Python, we'll put a colon instead of curly brackets. And then whatever comes next that's inside that statement or inside that block is going to be indented. Now in VS Code, if you hit return, it'll automatically be indented, or you could tab it over yourself. Now what we can do here is just print I. We could start by doing that, because even though I stands for iteration, it's also somewhat of a variable that's being created in here. So that way we can print out I because it represents each item in that range. So if we print this out right now, I'll run it. You can see that it runs through 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. It runs through 5 times, so it goes through a range 5 times. It starts with 0 because everything with computers starts with 0, but it runs through 5 times and it just prints that out. So that's simple enough. But there's lots of things we can do in here. Now, just for example, let's say I'll make a variable called greeting, and it can be a string called hello. And what I'll do here is I'll just print out greeting. Instead of printing out I, it's still going to iterate through 5 times, but now it's going to print greeting. And what should happen, it should print out hello 5 times. And let's see if it does. And there it is, hello 5 times. So it can help us do things in a repetitive manner, which is going to be real helpful. It's going to reduce code, reduce errors, and make our code more efficient. Now we can also do this. Instead of in range 5, what if I put greeting in there, in the range of greeting? Let's just see what happens here, and then I'll print I. Now in that one I got an error because the reason I got an error because it's looking for a integer in here, in range, and it's looking for a number to go through. But what I could do here, if I took out range, and I just said for I in greeting, let's see what happens here. Now it actually runs through the letters of this string. It iterates through the greeting variable, which is this string hello, and it actually goes through and prints out the letters of hello. Now, one thing you can also do, we introduced a counter in our last exercise, so let's just count how many times this goes through. And let's use a longer word here. Let's use Pennsylvania. And I'll put a count here, and I'll say equals 0 to start, because we always want to start at 0 and start going up from there. And in addition, what we'll do here is when we go through greeting, and let me change this to be state, because greeting doesn't really make sense, for I in state, and what we'll do, we could print out all those letters, and we can also do a count, and I'll say count plus or equals 1. Now, remember from our last exercise, that's the same thing as adding to itself, as incrementing, as saying count equals count plus 1. It's just a shortcut. So instead of doing that, we could do plus equals, and I'll do plus equals 1. And if you ever get confused and are thinking, well, is it equals plus 1? Well, it can't be equals plus 1, because if you did that, it would just be the number 1. It would be the positive number 1. So you always want to have equals last and the operator first. So we're going to do plus equals 1, and I'll put a space just so it looks better. So what's going to happen now, it's going to count that, and we're going to print the count here as well. Now, when I do this, what's going to happen, it's going to do this, it's going to print the first letter and then count, the second letter count, so it's going to look kind of confusing. So I'll change it then. But let's just do this and see what happens. You can see what happened. It's hard to even read, but it's going P and then 1, and then E and then 2. So that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't help us. What would be nice is to actually move this print statement, the second one, back out of the loop, because we don't want it to actually fire off as many times as letters that are there. We just want to count the letters. We want to print out the letters each time on a separate line, and then at the end we want to indicate the count of how many letters it went through. So let's see what happens when we do that. So now it went through, it printed out all the letters in Pennsylvania, and at the end it said 12. So it actually counted these up. So the for loop is very powerful, and we're going to be able to put functions in here and all kinds of operations. We'll be working with turtles and using the for loop. We can cycle through lists and all kinds of numbers and operations. So it's very powerful, but I just wanted to give you a little introduction. Since we did introduce it, I didn't just want to move over it very quickly, but we're going to try to use it just a little bit more. And again, we could put loops inside of loops, and there's different kinds of loops. There's while loops, and we have conditional statements that we have to get to. But just to start, this is a real powerful statement to use in our Python code.